Hi, and welcome to Sociology and Coffee. Today I have a simple cup of the good stuff because that is 100% how I'm feeling. It's still coffee though for now, but yes, definitely need a cup of the good stuff. Today I want to talk about something that's very personal to me, and I feel like personal to a lot of the people that I know, and that's this issue of the health disparities specifically for Black women. So I'll share a little bit about why this is important for me and why this is a topic I felt like I needed to bring to my YouTube platform and discuss that this is something that is very real in regards to Black women in the relationship to healthcare professionals. And so as most of you may know, those of you who know me on a personal level, I have a 3-year-old little girl, and I developed preeclampsia when I was pregnant with her. I was about 35 weeks when they actually started taking my symptoms seriously. So I had high blood pressure starting at about 17 weeks pregnant. And it was something that was always kind of like, okay, your blood pressure's high, but let's just have you sit, relax, we'll retake it. Every time they retook it, it seemed that my blood pressure would be fine. Even myself, I felt like maybe when I was going to a very small and underfunded clinic at the time, so we'll just kind of put it that way. So I felt like, maybe it's the stress of the waiting room, and there always seemed to be something happening that was wrong with my appointment time, with whatever. And so I kind of attribute it to that at first. But then, the more that I noticed that my blood pressure was high almost all the time, I switched clinics because I felt like that clinic was contributing to a lot of stress early on in my pregnancy. When I switched clinics, it seemed to kind of even out a little bit. Like, it'd be high every once in a while. But when I hit 34 weeks was really when things started to kick off. So I became very, very swollen. My blood pressure was extremely high, like deathly high, if we're just being 100% honest. And there was always this conversation. Every time I went in, it was like, okay, your blood pressure is too high. We're going to have to get baby out. So I'd get sent to the county hospital, go through triage. They would decide whether or not they were going to keep me. And every time they decided that they were not going to keep me. And so this happened about 2 times a week, starting from when I was 34 weeks pregnant. So it was this constant like, okay, get your bag ready. Let's go to the hospital. I'm going to have the baby today. She's going to be very early. And it was really stressful. And it was really fear of unknown. But when I hit 38 weeks, my blood pressure got dangerously high. So I was in triple digits, over triple digits. And so I immediately was taken to the hospital, which was right across the street. I was induced. So even though I had high blood pressure, they wanted me to have the baby, quote, naturally, without medical intervention. And so, I was induced, but I was also on magnesium. And so they were afraid, which at the time, right? Like, I was so not aware of what was going on, but my medical team was afraid that I was going to have a stroke. Or potentially die, right? And so what they did is they kept me on magnesium. I was on magnesium for almost 3 days. No induction medication was working. When I tell you that they tried everything on me, they tried Cervidil, they tried Pitocin, they tried so many different things that my body was not responding to, and yet my blood pressure was high the whole time, right? And so that's the important part to understand, is that I myself was in a lot of danger through this process of trying to get the baby out in this natural way. So on day 3, they finally decided that they were going to do an emergency C-section, and I had my baby through C-section. I didn't realize in the moment how much my life was in danger through that induction process. And so throughout those whole almost 3 days, there was very high chances that I was going to die, have a stroke, be unable to meet my child. And this is something that happens a lot to Black women. So Black women are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth than white women. Black women are more likely to receive lesser health care, and that's taken into account income and education levels. And so I don't know if any of you know, but both Beyonce and Serena Williams had very, very scary death, driven or like scared of death type of experiences during pregnancy and or labor. And so it's like, it has nothing to do with the fact that I was on, state assistance medical care. That could have something to do with it. But the research just tells us that it does not matter what your income or education levels are. Black women are still more likely to receive this type of health care. And this is rooted in historical grounds, right? And so there was a lot of research done in the past during the times of slavery that indicated or tried to prove that Black people, in particular Black women, could not feel pain. And so, Black women are less likely to be prescribed pain medications. They're less likely to be given an epidural. They're less likely to be having their labor experience taken seriously. And all of this is current day, right? So this research is current day, and yet it is so deeply rooted and connected to this past science that tried to prove that Black people, or Black women in particular, could not experience pain in the same way that we had higher pain thresholds. And it was used to justify a lot of things, right? It was used to justify giving Black women cesareans without any type of anesthesia, right? Like, that was a legitimate medical practice. We did not receive anesthesia for cesarean sections, for a C-section, something that literally is one of the most major surgeries that you can have. It was just expected that we could handle the pain. And so I can't help but make those types of connections between what I experienced and how they continued to allow me and allow my body to go through what it was going through when there was a inevitable C-section happening, right? Like, my body, my child was not ready to come out. It was necessary that she came out. I was only 38 weeks. It was necessary for my benefit, right? Like, to save me is why my child needs to be born at 38 weeks. But at the same time, I was not the concern when it came time to birth her. So every time I went in for them to check my blood pressure, it was always like, okay, well, let's monitor the baby. We'll check your blood pressure, but we are going to monitor the baby, and baby's fine. So you're fine. Right. So it was always like this. Okay, well, how's baby doing? My baby was always fine. She was never the concern with my maternal health. It was me who was at risk. And so we also kind of know that Black women are more likely to, or Black children, Black infants, the mortality rate is higher for Black children. And so Black children are already more likely to die during birth, or their first, entrance into the world than white children. And so what does that say about medical practice? What does that say about this historical legacy of, the belief that Black people or Black women cannot experience pain? They are still using the same medical books now that they were hundreds of years ago, when these types of beliefs were still very rampant in the medical profession. And a lot of the beliefs have not changed. And so there is research out there right now that says 50 to 60% of medical students still believe a lot of these very historically based, dehumanizing, very untrue statements being taught as science based off of research that was done hundreds of years ago, when Black people were slaves, were enslaved. And so it's a conversation that continues, that needs to continue to happen. And those of you who are going into the medical field, it's very important that you figure out ways to strip yourselves of these biases, of these things that are being taught still current day to medical students, because it has an impact on people like me, right? People like me who, at the time I had my bachelor's in sociology, I considered myself very aware of my social world. And at the same time, when you're in it, it doesn't feel like you have a say, and it doesn't feel like you are being respected, or your wishes or your thoughts or your, health and safety is being honored. And so, yeah, I had a very traumatizing birthing experience, and yet at the same time, I made it out, whereas a lot of Black women and a lot of Black infants do not. And so this is a conversation that I hope that you will have with, your friend groups, with your networks, and how we can start, tackling large issues like this. It's most definitely borderline a form of genocide if we are constantly having Black people dying at the hands of medical professionals due to these, unconscious or even conscious biases that are still actively being taught in education. And so hopefully this kind of sparks a conversation for you. It's very near and dear and close to my heart. My own sister is getting ready to have a baby right now during, this pandemic, and I myself cannot be there. And so kind of knowing that and carrying my own experiences along with me, I hope and pray that, this is not something that extends throughout my family, throughout the Black women in my family. And so, yeah, there we go. Cheers.